Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kenny Taylor, and I work for an organisation called Zero Waste Scotland. We're based in Stirling, but we work for the Scottish Government to deliver circular economy in Scotland, and I'll explain what that means in a wee moment. I've been with Zero Waste Scotland for just over 3 months now. So I started just in the summer this year. And before that, I worked, for another Scottish Government organisation called Nature Scot, which was looking to improve Scotland's nature biodiversity. So this morning, I'm going to talk about the materials that we need to build our energy system of the future, which is going to have to be a change from the way we currently make energy and what we make energy from and the fuel that we use to a new energy system using our natural world, wind and heat and the sun, stuff like that. So I'm just going to talk through that. I've got some slides to show you this morning. So let's crack on. So what do I mean by energy infrastructure? So if you think about the things in your house that you need for that need energy, so your kettle, your cooker, your radiators, and any other heating that you have, your light bulbs, that comes from electricity, or it might come from burning gas and oil. And they have to be, that fuel and that power has to be got to your house somehow. So it travels along wires or it comes through pipes. And that comes from a station, a generating station somewhere in Scotland or further afield, where that electricity or that power is produced in order to feed your house. So it's all those bits of the story that I mean by energy infrastructure. And to build all those bits of kit, those pipes and those wires and those pylons and the big generating stations or solar panels requires materials. And where do we get our materials from is the big question on my mind. So just quickly about Zero Waste Scotland first. We exist as an organisation, and there's a few hundred of us in the organisation, a few hundred people, to help everyone understand that materials shouldn't just be used and thrown away, that we should reuse a lot of the materials that we have and use them responsibly so that we can get the most value out of them, so that at the end of what they were made for, we can either break them down and reuse and recycle them and take the various bits that make them up. Again, think of like a Lego house that you build. If you break it down, you've still got the bricks and you can build something else. And we do this because if we don't do it, then we risk contributing to climate change because we have to extract more materials from the ground. So 80% of our current carbon footprint of the emissions that Scotland are sending up into the air and contributing to climate change comes from the materials that we use. So it comes from the produce that we make and the services, to the running of transport, that sort of thing, and from the materials that we use. And a lot of these materials come from other countries, and we have to transport them here before we use them. So we don't make all the stuff that we need here in Scotland, so we have to transport it. And that is consuming the earth. We are continually extracting to make stuff, whether that's making energy or making products, like like your computers at home, like your furniture, like your houses, like your cars, like the trains and the buses that we use and the roads that we drive on. All these things require us to take materials and make them into something and use them. And then at the end of the life, we should be thinking, can we use this again? Or how can we break it down to its basic parts to make other stuff that we need? And that's what Zero Waste Scotland's job is all about. So I've just got a wee video here I'm going to show you, and this chap here is going to explain a bit more about the circular economy.
The circular economy is about the use of objects, which means the owner, user, me, you, is in control. It means caring for all assets, and be they natural or cultural or human or manufactured. It's about maintaining stocks and the value and utility of stocks. The circular economy needs a personal motivation. For some people it's saving the environment, for some people it's saving money because it's cheaper. And that's why probably the circular economy should already be taught at primary schools. If you only deal with it at universities, you are no longer reaching everybody. I have 2 cars.
So I hope you all heard that okay. There's a couple of words in there that are important to maybe just explain. So there was assets. So these are things in the world that are of benefit to us. And the other one is stocks. And we can think of those 2 words together in a forest. So if we've got a forest near where we live, a small woodland, whatever, a collection of trees, the stocks are the trees themselves. And the asset is having that woodland because it's of benefit to us. It sends oxygen into the atmosphere and it soaks up carbon dioxide to help climate change. And we can also walk in it and have the benefit of spending an afternoon walking around a nice woodland. So it's important that we think about the things around us and how they benefit us and why we want to maintain them.
The circular economy.
So I'll just move on, hopefully, to the next slide. There we go. So at the moment, unfortunately, a lot of the way that we use materials is in a linear economy. It's called a linear economy. And that means that we extract materials from the ground. So we do coal mining, we do mining of metals to make them into metals, but we have to find them on the earth first and dig a big hole and then undertake a process to produce the stuff that we need, and then we sell it and we use it, and then we throw it away into landfill sites. And there's a big landfill site not far from me on the way to Falkirk, just down the road from Stirling, and it's getting bigger and bigger all the time. And if you think about this in going to your cupboard to get out a packet of crisps or something, and then you eat all the crisps and they're gone and you put the packet in the bin, and then the next day you have another packet of crisps, and the next day after that, and eventually your bin will get full up and you'll run out of crisps and you'll have to go somewhere else to find the crisps, and you'll have to go where your bin will just get fuller and fuller until it starts to overflow, and you think, oh no, where am I going to put all my rubbish now? You have to find somewhere else and put it there. So this is about using materials responsibly and thinking, okay, how can I do something differently here so I don't get an overflowing bin? And is there a different way of making things so that I don't run out, so that I don't go and not run out? So successful linear economy, the path that we've currently been on, suggests that there will always be resources, so there will always be crisps in your cupboard or whatever other material. There will always be, I don't know, sand available to us, and that we can always throw something away. And out of sight, out of mind is not a great term, because we want to be thinking about the materials that we use. However, a circular economy starts to think, okay, at what point can I, make my own crisps out of less material, out of, my own material, and can I grow my own material? Can I grow my own potatoes so I don't have to buy them in? And then can I reuse the crisp packets for something? And if you think about it from an energy point of view, then you could think, okay, now I've put a big wind turbine up in the sky, up in the hills. How can I use the material at the end of that life in a better way? Can I repair the wind turbine so it lasts longer? Because at the moment, wind turbines only are up for 25 years. So can I do it for 20? Can I make it last longer? Then any material that comes out of the wind turbine that's broken, can I reuse it? Can I fix it and reuse it? Refurbish that wind turbine? And then when it finally comes to the very end of its life, can I recycle that turbine into different things and make different things that I need? So can the big blades that come off a wind farm, can I make them into a bus shelter or a play park, bits of a play park? So that's more of a circular economy. And as I said at the start, if you're thinking about having to make lots of things in your country, we can track that and we can identify what comes into the country to make the stuff that we need. If we need buses and cars and transport, if we need more furniture, if we need to build buildings, make bridges, build your school, that all requires materials, steel and concrete and glass and wood. And a huge amount of that material comes from other places in the world. Some of the wood comes from our own forests, but we also import raw materials. And in Scotland, we do that to the tune of about 129 million tonnes. And then we use a huge amount of that material, and we export some of our own material. So we might dig for sand in this country, or we grow trees and we export our trees. So there's a lot of movement of materials here, and perhaps we want to keep that in Scotland, and so there's no carbon budget attached to the transport of material. We want to reuse material so we don't have to extract, particularly from abroad, which can often have lower environmental controls. So pollution risk is higher. And we can do that in Scotland, where we can build up the skills and the jobs and the knowledge, and our environmental protection is better than in some other countries, so we do less damage to nature. So what is net zero? I've been talking about climate change, I've been talking about carbon emissions, and climate change is changing the climate which affects our weather. So as you're probably aware, hopefully you'll have studied this in your schools, our winters are getting milder, particularly in the UK and in Scotland. We might have less snow in the future. We're going to have more storms, more rain, higher winds, and other parts of the world are going to get warmer and warmer, and maybe see drought conditions where it just gets drier. So all the countries in the world get together every year and at other times to talk about how to reduce the emissions of carbon dioxide and other nitrous oxide and other dangerous gases that go into the atmosphere that warm our planet by forming a layer and allowing the sun's radiation not to leave the atmosphere, not to leave the planet, and it just warms it up. And we want to keep the increase in temperatures down to at least 2 degrees, if not below that, so that these changes to our weather systems don't go out of control and we don't see massive changes and cause massive problems for the animals and plants and humans that live on this planet. So we agree to try and keep emissions low, and to do that we need to change our energy systems. And Scotland are focusing on doing so, and they've written a number of high-level strategies written by the Scottish Government. We've got a climate change plan, which says this is how we will reduce our emissions, and they break it down into different sectors like agriculture and farming, or the energy system, or the construction system, and it says this is how each of these bits of our society can contribute to reducing emissions and to keeping carbon dioxide locked up or not emitted into the atmosphere. And we've got to really reduce them fast. So as you can see, the black line on the left-hand side of this graph going up and up and up and up and up and up and up, that is the amount of carbon dioxide emissions in the world and in the UK going up and up and up. And we need to get on a pathway to reduce these emissions. We need to start cutting out. So we need to stop building power stations that use fossil fuels like coal and gas. And Scotland are pretty good at that. We're moving away from that already. But we've got to drive maybe less cars because they also emit carbon dioxide. We've got to walk and cycle more instead. So there are pathways to do this. And it gets more difficult as we move on. We'll have to keep thinking of different ways to reduce emissions, and reusing materials rather than mining new ones is a good way of doing so. And developed countries like the UK should be helping other countries who might find this more difficult or already feeling the effects of climate change to change their ways of living as well. So it's about the whole world coming together here and helping each other out. So our energy system, if we're going to focus on transitioning away from burning fossil fuels, so this picture in the top right of the oil rig out at sea, they pull gas and oil out of the ground beneath the North Sea and other seas around the world. And then they send it on land, and then we send it on in pipes, and then we make things out of the oil, and we also burn the oil and we burn the gas, as you know. And we need to move away from that to using renewable energy sources. And so we need to build more wind farms and more solar powers. And perhaps we need to start making hydrogen, and you can use green renewable energy, renewable electricity to make hydrogen by putting an electric current through water and making hydrogen and oxygen. And then we can use the hydrogen to burn and to cook with and use it as a fuel for other reasons, and it doesn't give off carbon dioxide. The other interesting piece of energy kit is nuclear. And nuclear produces low carbon electricity as well, because there's not much carbon comes off when you go down the nuclear fuel route. But it takes a lot to build all the safety buildings and kit around a nuclear plant to produce this electricity. And then you've got to get rid of the waste, which is contaminated with radiation at the end of it. So we need to think carefully about the energy that we're going to need in the future and have in the future, and that we don't make some of the same mistakes we've been making already. We want 50% of our energy to come from renewable energy sources by 2030, and almost all of our energy should be decarbonized, so not have a carbon positive output by 2050. So we want to be low carbon by 2050. However, we need also to think about the people that are working in the current energy system. So this is about transitioning and having a just transition. But it also means thinking about the materials that we use. So if we go back to the last slide, on that picture of the oil rig there, on the top right of the picture, there's a huge amount of material on that oil rig. There's all sorts of pipe works, there's banisters, there's accommodation blocks, there's huge amounts of metal and steel on that oil rig. So can we use that material? And we do a process called decommissioning, which means we take apart that oil rig, we drag it onto shore, and some of our ports around Scotland will have to handle big oil rigs like this. Can we take them apart, like taking apart a Lego house, and then reuse the bits to make renewable energy infrastructure like wind turbines? So there's huge amounts of steel in the oil rig. Can we do that? Can we use that steel to make the materials of the future and the energy infrastructure of the future? Now, we don't currently have the processing facilities, the factories, the industry in Scotland to reprocess some of that steel. And we export the scrap steel from oil rigs and other sources to other countries, and then we buy it back as wind turbines. But could we be using it in Scotland? Could we set up our own industry? And what about the people working on these oil rigs? If we say we don't need oil rigs anymore, we don't want to extract oil or gas anymore, then what will they do? Because they will be out of a job. And so we need to think about allowing the people the opportunity to come and work in different industries, maybe offshore wind farms or onshore wind farms, but we can't abandon the people associated with the old style of energy to the same fate. They need a just transition to move them across to good jobs and learn new skills. So we're already well on our way to this. We are thinking about decommissioning. We've got ports that are ports and harbours around Scotland's coast that are currently building and expanding and gearing up to deal with all the material that's going to come onshore from oil and gas infrastructure, all the gas platforms and oil platforms. And they're making space for all the foundations and the legs and the blades attached to offshore turbines. So it's thinking about what do we have and what do we need? And do we have the space in the middle to make it all happen? Do we have the space to sort out what we need to put out at sea to make clean energy? And do we have the space to break down the old type of energies to produce the new ones? And that is happening right now. So Scotland are seriously thinking about this, and the Scottish Government are about to publish an energy strategy and just transition plan that will set out how to make this transition from old energy technologies to new technologies, thinking about the people involved and thinking about materials and how we recycle and reuse materials to get the greatest value out and mean that we have a domestic supply chain, so a domestic movement of materials and a manufacturing process to make all this. Towards net zero. So this is a crazy map of some of the material flows that will be involved in our transition towards net zero. So on the left-hand side is all the materials that we're going to need to build all the bits of renewable energy kit to make green electricity and green heat generation in the future. And on the right-hand side is an estimate of some of the materials that we think will come from decommissioning all the old energy technologies, like gas plants, oil and gas, oil rigs, and that sort of thing. So we think there's this amount of material available on the right-hand side, and we'll need this amount of material. So think about all the electric vehicle cars that will be driving around in the future, all the charging points and all the cables that we'll need for all of that. That will require a huge amount of material. It might be rubber and steel and concrete, and all the hydroelectricity, so all the little dams and hydroelectric schemes on our hillsides that generate electricity from water, and all our wind turbines that require big, tall turbines, steel turbines, and blades to whirl round and generate our electricity. So just trying to show in this diagram the movement of materials and the need for materials overall for this energy transition. So with all that in mind, this is what we want in the future. So by 2045 and by 2050, we want to be decarbonized, low carbon in our energy system as possible. So we are no longer contributing to climate change. And at the same time, we're protecting our nature, and we're thinking about the communities and the people and the social impact of both the people in Scotland and people living abroad as well and working abroad, so that we are not exploiting materials from these countries who have sometimes lesser standards than we do in terms of environmental protection and social protection. Our supply chains are resilient because we're reusing the materials so that we know there's a source of materials within Scotland and we don't have to look abroad where everyone else is looking as well. So it's important that we have a stock of critical materials and that local economies are thriving and there's lots of skilled jobs on offer in this energy transition and in the energy systems of the future. But there's some key questions that need to be answered before we get there. And what if some countries start to run out of critical materials? What if there's not as much metals in the ground as we thought there was somewhere before we get to a point in the future? Is that where we have to start thinking seriously about what materials we have in Scotland? What if you can no longer import or export certain types of materials? And then how could we manage the materials that we do have properly? Are all the timelines correctly set up? So are we going to decommission oil rigs and take apart our oil rigs in time to supply the offshore wind requirements to build big turbines? So we have to make sure all the timing and the management is correct, that our ports and harbours and other hubs around the country can deal with that material. So I'm going to leave you with a question at the end, and feel free to ask me any questions. Just drop it in the chat, and I'll read them out and try and answer these. But so, based on what I've said there, I'm hoping you've had some thoughts about it. How can we reduce the material demands of our economies? So I said right at the start, we use a huge amount of material in Scotland for all our needs. But can we reduce that demand of materials while still making the shift to using clean energy and cutting greenhouse gas emissions? So use the Mentimeter to ask your questions. If you stick a question in there, it will pop up for me, and I can answer that as they come through. Thank you very much. Oh, that's a good question. So somebody has asked, what can we do to be net zero in the school? So you can think in the school, you can think about what fuel you're using to heat your classrooms and light your classrooms and your corridors, and any other fuel that you're using. And you could think, could we convert that to, if it's not already, could we convert that to renewable energy fuel? Can we transition across and put solar panels on our roof, or a wee wind turbine in our playground or something like that? And if you have got renewable energy technologies already, can you share them with your neighbours, with the local residents or whoever's around you? Can you increase the amount? So it's worth talking to your local council about that. Also think about the fuel, the energy in your school that might be escaping. So are all your windows properly double glazed? Have you got your radiators on at the same time as your windows open? Do your doors close automatically in your corridors so that you keep the heat in the school? So it's worth thinking about reducing the amount of energy that the school needs in terms of turning off and on lights and other computer, just behavioural things like that. You know, are you thinking about washing your hands in cold water, hot water, and that sort of thing? So it's important to think about that, and also how you are getting to school. So do all the pupils get driven to school? Is there a bus that goes to school? Can you cycle safely to school? Can you write to your local authority, to the council, and say, we demand a cycle lane or something to our school? And is there cycle shelters at the school to put your bikes in to stop them getting wet all through the day and that sort of thing? So lots of things you can do to make your school to put your school on a pathway to net zero. You could also grow some more of your own food or wee woodlands or plants in your school grounds, and that will provide more oxygen and soak up more carbon dioxide around school. So there are loads of options, and Zero Waste Scotland can help you with advice, but also Nature Scot can help you with school grounds works and that sort of thing. And there are awards, you get your Green Flag awards, that sort of thing. So, would these actions affect energy bills while also protecting the world? Yes, they do. They do indeed. Would these actions affect your energy bill as well as saving the world? They can, because if we're on more of a circular economy path, then the materials that we use to build the renewable energy infrastructure have been recycled and reused. So we've taken them out of bits of infrastructure that we no longer need in Scotland, and we've made them into bits of renewable energy power stations. And therefore, we're not tearing up the earth to find new raw materials. So we're not opening new mines or not expanding old mines to make them bigger, and we're not polluting local rivers and stuff like that, or the air from those sorts of activities. So yes, if we're on a true circular economy, then we're looking to reuse and recycle in a controlled, environmentally friendly, non-polluting manner of putting materials back into circulation to make the infrastructure that we need to make low carbon energy. So yes, those are helping. And climate change is a big threat to our natural world. So anything that takes more carbon dioxide out of the air is saving the plants and animals across our planet. Have a little look in the chat, see if there's any more. Not seeing anything more coming through yet. How can young STEM leaders encourage others to consider zero waste? So that's a good question. So there are materials online. I can send some links through to STEM on that. But it's just thinking about the materials that you use and the services that you use every day, and how you can start to reduce the burden of some of these of some of this material use and services that you use. So could you walk to the local shops rather than getting a lift? Rather than getting a lift from your parents or whoever, can you walk to wherever you're going, so that we don't need to make, so we don't need to fix the roads so much, we don't have to make more cars, and our cars don't run out, that sort of thing. So at that end of the scale, you could walk and cycle and do more. You could plant some food, even on your windowsill. Plant some of your own herbs and some vegetables and stuff, so that we're not having to import and all the transport associated with importing our foods. And then there's the clothes you wear. Do you need to buy more and more clothes? Can you go to the second-hand shop and buy clothes there? And can you donate to the second-hand shop the clothes, or that, rather than throw them out, or into clothes recycling? So yes, there's loads of things, and all the time that you reduce your energy demand, so not turning lights on, playing the Xbox or the PlayStation or whatever a little less, is putting less pressure on the need for energy infrastructure and the use of more materials. What skills would such jobs require in the future? Well, we're going to need a massive amount of new skills and jobs, and at the moment Scotland has a bit of a shortage in some of these potentially. And loads of sectors across Scotland will be competing for similar sort of jobs, but we'll need electrical engineers to make sure all the electrical systems associated with renewable energy are all properly wired up and connected and functioning. We'll need civil engineers to build kits and to build, from cycle paths, new cycle paths, all the way through to actual big generating hydrogen stations and putting pipes in the ground. We'll need mechanical engineers, we'll need planners, and we'll need strategists, people who plan out entire systems, make sure people are connected and our infrastructure is located in the right places. So a huge number of people will need to be employed in the future to cover all this. And Zero Waste Scotland are working and thinking about the whole range of jobs and skills that will be required in the future. But we certainly need a lot of engineers, I will say that. We'll also need people to drive the boats, they get kit and people out to offshore wind farms. We'll need navigators, we'll need deep sea divers. It's a big, endless list. Next question, how does Scotland compare to other countries when it comes to energy transition? That's a good question, very good question. Scotland are doing very well and are a wee bit ahead of the game. I can't think off the top of my head how we compare directly with other countries, but we've set very ambitious targets to become net zero. As I was saying, 2045 actually for decarbonising our energy system, while others are a wee bit behind that, perhaps, than maybe 2050 beyond that. And we've got strong targets on the way to that. So, 50% by 2030. So we are looking seriously at this. We've already closed down our coal sites, our coal power generating sites. We're putting up loads of turbines. We've got lots of ambitions and targets to meet for renewable energy, and we're writing that into Scottish Government policy now. So compared to others, we're doing pretty well, but definitely other countries are following suit, and there are examples of huge amounts of solar arrays and wind turbine farms going up all over the world. So thank you all very much indeed for joining us this morning. I hope you found that interesting. and useful, and gets you thinking a wee bit about climate change and the material use within the energy system and more widely, and how to make that more circular so that we don't continue on our linear economy pathways, but move to a more circular economy. There is more information on our website and on the Scottish Government websites, and I'm sure STEM has some useful information on this as well. So keep asking the questions, keep thinking about these issues, and I'll see you next time.